The black American Express Centurion card slid across the grimy diner table with a sound that would change everything. Annabel Thompson's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee pot. She'd been on her feet for 6 hours straight, her second shift of the day, and she still had 4 more hours to go before she could catch the last bus home to her kids. The man sitting in booth 7, the one in the expensive suit who'd introduced himself simply as John, was staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. 24 hours, he repeated, his voice calm but weighted with something she couldn't quite name. No limits. No strings. No cameras following you around for some reality show. Just you, this card, and the freedom to do whatever you want with it. Before we continue this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of human kindness, hit that subscribe button for Heartwarming stories. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Annabel laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound that caught in her throat. This had to be a joke. A scam. Some kind of sick test. She'd seen enough of life's cruelty to know that when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. But Jonathan Pierce, though she didn't know his real name yet, reached into his briefcase and pulled out 2 documents. One was a letter on official bank letterhead, confirming the card's validity and unlimited credit. The other was a legal document, stamped and notarized, stating there would be no repayment required, no hidden fees, no consequences. Why? The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. Why me? Jonathan's eyes flickered with something, grief, maybe, or recognition. Because 3 days ago, I watched you find a $20 bill in the parking lot. You needed it. I could see it in your face, in the way your hands trembled when you picked it up. But you took it inside and gave it to the manager. You did the right thing even when doing the wrong thing would have been so much easier. Annabel felt her throat tighten. That $20 could have bought Matthew's inhaler refill. It could have fixed Lily's broken backpack zipper. It could have been 3 meals she didn't have to skip. I don't understand what you want from me, she whispered. Nothing. Jonathan stood, preparing to leave. I want nothing from you, Annabel. But I'm going to give you something. A chance. 24 hours with this card, starting the moment you take it. I'll be back here tomorrow morning at exactly this time. What you do with those hours is entirely up to you. He pushed the card closer. In the fluorescent diner lights, it gleamed like a dark promise. Annabel thought about the eviction notice tucked in her purse. About Matthew's asthma medication she'd been rationing for 3 weeks. About Lily's winter coat held together with safety pins. About the collection calls she'd stopped answering because there were no answers left to give. Her fingers closed around the card. 24 hours, Jonathan confirmed, checking his watch. Starting now. 8:47 a.m. Then he walked out of the diner, leaving Annabel standing there with $10 million in available credit burning in her palm and absolutely no idea what came next. What would you do? Seriously, pause and think about it. If someone handed you unlimited money for just 1 day, what would be your first purchase? Comment below, I'm genuinely curious. Because what Annabel was about to do, nobody saw it coming. Annabel's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she stood in front of the ATM, the black card inserted into the machine like a key to another dimension. She'd convinced herself 1,000 times during the 10-minute drive that this was fake, that the card would be declined, that she'd wake up from whatever fever dream she'd stumbled into. The screen blinked, available credit, $10 million. She made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and had to grip the ATM machine to keep from collapsing. $10 million. More money than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes of working 3 jobs, scrubbing floors, and serving coffee to people who barely saw her. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe to Heartwarming Stories. We bring you the most incredible, heartwarming, and emotional real-life stories that'll restore your faith in humanity. Don't miss what happens next, trust me, you need to see this. Her first stop was the pharmacy. She walked in with her head down, approaching the counter where she'd begged for payment plans, for extensions, for mercy more times than she could count. The pharmacist, Mrs. Kim, looked up with that familiar expression of sympathy mixed with helplessness. Matthew's refills, Annabel said quietly. All of them. The full prescriptions. No rationing. $347. In her old life, that was catastrophic. Today, it was the easiest decision she'd ever made. She cried in the parking lot, clutching the white paper bag like it was made of gold. Then something shifted inside her. She drove to Target and bought Lily a real winter coat. Not from the clearance rack. Not from the thrift store with someone else's memory sewn into the seams. A new coat, puffy and warm and bright pink because that was Lily's favorite color. $68 that felt like a revolution. But as Annabelle loaded the coat into her beat-up Honda, she saw Mrs. Patterson from her apartment building struggling with grocery bags across the parking lot. Mrs. Patterson, who'd shared canned soup with her kids when Annabelle's paycheck was still 3 days away. Mrs. Patterson, who was 74 and living on Social Security and had probably never bought herself anything new in a decade. Annabelle made a decision that would define everything that followed. She went back into the store, filled a cart with groceries, and paid for Mrs. Patterson's items too. The elderly woman hugged her and cried, and Annabelle felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Hope. Purpose. Power. 3 hours into her 24 hours, Annabelle had spent less than $5,000. She'd paid her back rent, 3 months of terror erased with a single credit card swipe. She'd gotten her car fixed, the engine finally purring instead of coughing. She'd bought her kids actual winter clothes, not hand-me-downs held together with prayers. But then she started seeing them. Really seeing them. The homeless veteran she passed every day on her way to work, holding his cardboard sign with hands that trembled from more than just cold. She bought him a hot meal, new boots, a winter coat. She handed him $500 cash and watched him stare at the bills like they were written in a foreign language. The single father in her building who'd just lost his job, she paid his rent for 6 months. $7,200 that would keep his family housed while he found his footing. Rachel, her co-worker at the diner, whose teenage daughter covered her mouth when she smiled because she couldn't afford braces. Annabelle paid the orthodontist in full. $6,800 for a smile that had been stolen by poverty. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Not because Annabelle was broadcasting her actions, she was doing everything quietly, almost secretly, but because miracles, real miracles, can't be hidden. They leave traces. They change the air itself. People started approaching her. A woman fleeing an abusive relationship who needed a security deposit for a safe apartment. A teenager who'd been accepted to community college but couldn't afford tuition. A family burying their grandmother who couldn't pay for the funeral. Annabelle helped them all. By hour 15, she'd spent $45,000, more money than she'd earned in the past 2 years combined. She was exhausted, emotionally shattered, but she couldn't stop. Every face she saw reminded her of her own reflection. Every struggle was one she'd lived. But something was gnawing at her. A terrible realization that was growing with each passing hour. The clock was ticking. In 9 hours, this would all be over. The card would go back to Jonathan. The magic would end. And tomorrow, she'd wake up in the same crumbling apartment, facing the same impossible choices, except now she'd know exactly how many people she couldn't save. She sat in her newly repaired car with Lily and Matthew in the back seat, and she broke down. Great, heaving sobs that made her children scared and confused. "Mama, why are you crying if the nice man gave you magic money?" Lily asked, her small hand reaching forward to touch Annabelle's shoulder. Annabelle looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. At Matthew with his inhaler clutched in his hand, an inhaler he'd never have to ration again, at least for this moment. At the bags of new clothes and groceries filling her trunk. And she realized something that would define the most important decision of her life. She had 6 hours left. What would you do with 6 hours and millions left to spend? Would you finally think of yourself? Or would you keep giving? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Herat Vault Stories. This story is about to take a turn that will absolutely shatter you. Because what Annabelle did next, even Jonathan never saw it coming. The hospital's financial office closed at 5 p.m., which meant Annabelle had exactly 47 minutes to do something that most people would call crazy. She burst through the doors of Mercy Children's Hospital, the same place where she'd brought Matthew a dozen times for his asthma attacks, where she'd signed payment plans she knew she could never fulfill, where the billing department knew her name and her shame. But today, Everything was different. "I need to speak to someone in patient financial services," Annabelle said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Now." The woman behind the desk, Gloria, her name tag read, looked up with poorly concealed skepticism. She'd seen Annabelle before, had processed her payment deferrals, had witnessed her quiet desperation. "Mrs. Thompson, we're about to close. I want to pay off medical debt." Annabelle placed the black card on the counter with a firmness that surprised even herself. "Not just mine. All of it. Every family in the pediatric wing who has outstanding balances. I want to know the total, and I want to pay it right now." The office went silent. 3 employees stopped mid-task, turning to stare at this woman in her stained diner uniform making an impossible claim. Gloria's expression shifted from skepticism to something else, concern, maybe, or pity. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand you might be going through something, but medical debt isn't." "Run the card," Annabelle interrupted. Her hands had stopped shaking. For the first time in years, maybe in her entire life, she felt absolutely certain about something. "I have 23 minutes before my time runs out. Check the available credit and tell me the total debt for the pediatric families. Please. Before we reveal what happens next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button for Heartwarming stories. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in humanity again. Because what you're about to witness is the kind of moment that reminds us what we're capable of when we have the power to choose compassion over comfort." Gloria ran the card, her face going pale as the screen confirmed what it shouldn't confirm: unlimited credit, valid account, legitimate beyond any doubt. She picked up the phone, spoke in hushed tones to someone in administration, then looked back at Annabelle with tears forming in her eyes. 15 families, she whispered. Across pediatric oncology, emergency services, and long-term care. Total outstanding debt is $127,000. Most of these families will never be able to pay it. Some are already in collections. Some have stopped bringing their children in for follow-up care because they can't afford it. Annabelle felt something crack open in her chest, that same feeling she'd had with Mrs. Patterson, but magnified 1,000 times. These were children. Sick children whose parents faced the same impossible mathematics she did every day: medicine or food, treatment or rent, their child's life or their family's survival. "Charge it," Annabelle said. "All of it." The transaction processed. $127,000, gone in seconds. Gloria was openly crying now. Another employee had rushed to get the department head. Within minutes, Annabelle was surrounded by hospital staff who couldn't quite believe what had just happened. But she wasn't done. She had 4 hours left and one more thing to do, something that would define not just this day, but potentially hundreds of days for hundreds of people. She met with a lawyer, charging the consultation fees and legal costs to the card. Together, they established a trust fund, $100,000 deposited into an emergency relief account for her neighborhood community center. The fund would provide small grants, $500 to $2,000, for families in immediate crisis. No bureaucracy. No waiting lists. Just help when help was needed most. By the time Annabelle returned to the diner at 8:47 a.m. the next morning, she'd spent approximately $290,000. Out of 10 million available. She'd had access to wealth beyond imagination, and she'd spent less than 3% of it. She'd bought nothing for herself beyond Matthew's medicine and Lily's coat. No designer clothes. No luxury car. No mansion to replace her crumbling apartment. Nothing that would fundamentally change her circumstances beyond this single day. She slid the black card back across the table to Jonathan, who sat in the same booth, looking like he hadn't slept all night. "I know I was supposed to use it for me," Annabelle said, her voice breaking. "I know that's probably what you expected. But I couldn't." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I couldn't just think about my kids when Mrs. Patterson shares her food with them. I couldn't buy myself nice things when Rachel's daughter covers her mouth when she smiles. I had 24 hours with more money than I'll see in 3 lifetimes, and I just wanted to fix things. For everyone. I wanted to stop the hurting." Tears were streaming down her face now. "And the worst part is that it's over. Tomorrow everything goes back to the way it was, and I couldn't even fix enough. There's still so much broken. I failed." Jonathan stared at her, his eyes red, his jaw tight. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Open it," he whispered. Annabel's hands trembled as she lifted the flap. Inside was a check made out to her name, $5 million. And beneath it, a formal job offer letter on embossed stationery. Director of Community Impact, Horizon Trust. Salary, $150,000 per year. Mission, to identify and support struggling communities across the country. "I don't understand," Annabel breathed. Jonathan's voice cracked as he spoke. "My wife died 6 months ago. Before she passed, she told me I'd forgotten what money was for. She said I'd built walls around my heart so high that I couldn't see people drowning right in front of me." He wiped his eyes roughly. "I thought I was testing you. But you tested me." He leaned forward, his voice raw with emotion. "You spent 24 hours with unlimited money, and you barely spent anything on yourself. You didn't buy security or comfort or escape. You just saw pain and tried to stop it with everything you had, even knowing it would run out. That's not something money can buy. That's not something I can teach. That's who you are." The diner was silent except for the sound of Annabel's sobbing. "The check is yours. No conditions. The job is real, if you want it. Because I can't do this alone anymore. I need someone who knows what it's like to choose between medicine and food. Someone who would spend their last hours trying to save strangers." Jonathan stood, preparing to leave. "My wife's name was Isabel. She would have loved you. Comment below, would you have done what Annabel did, or would you have secured your own future first? There's no wrong answer, I genuinely want to know what you think. And subscribe to Heartwarming Stories for more incredible tales that'll make you believe in humanity again. Because this story isn't over yet. What happens next will show you the true ripple effect of a single day of compassion, and it will absolutely leave you in tears. 3 months had passed since the day at the diner, and Annabel Thompson was still trying to wrap her mind around the fact that her life had actually changed. She stood in front of the modest 3-bedroom house she'd purchased in a safe neighborhood, nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed wealth, but something with a backyard where Lily and Matthew could play without her worrying about broken glass or needles in the grass. She'd chosen carefully, deliberately. Because she never wanted to forget where she came from. The $5 million sat in her account like a responsibility, not a windfall. $2 million had gone into an educational trust for her children, their future secured in ways she'd never dared to dream. $1 million had established the Patterson Community Relief Fund, named after the elderly neighbor who'd shared soup with her kids. $500,000 had gone to families and causes she couldn't help during those 24 hours, the faces that haunted her dreams. She kept $1.5 million for herself. For security. For emergencies. For the peace of mind that came from knowing she'd never again have to ration her son's medicine or count pennies at the grocery store. But it was the job that truly transformed her. Director of Community Impact for the Horizon Trust. The title still felt surreal. Every morning, she walked into an office with Jonathan Pierce, and together they identified communities in crisis. Not through statistics or reports, but through stories. Through people. Through the kind of intimate knowledge that only comes from having lived it. If you're still watching, drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest. Was it Annabel paying off the medical debt? The Community Relief Fund? The job offer? And if you haven't subscribed to Heartwarming Stories yet, what are you waiting for? This channel is dedicated to bringing you stories that remind you why humanity is worth believing in. The program they built was revolutionary in its simplicity: identify, verify, help immediately, follow up. No bureaucratic red tape. No committees or approval processes that took months. Just immediate relief for people drowning in circumstances beyond their control. Within 3 months, they'd helped over 200 families. Within 6 months, that number climbed to 800. By month 9, the Horizon Trust had assisted over 2,000 families across 12 states. But something else happened that Annabel never expected. The families she'd helped during those 24 hours became her extended support network. Mrs. Patterson watched Lily and Matthew after school. Rachel's daughter, now wearing her braces with pride, tutored Lily in math. The single father she'd helped now volunteered at the community center. The homeless veteran had found housing and was working with other veterans experiencing homelessness. She'd created a web of connection that extended far beyond money. Jonathan attended Matthew's 7th birthday party, looking uncomfortable but genuine as he watched children play games in Annabelle's backyard. He'd helped Annabelle sort through Isabel's belongings, a task he couldn't face alone, but could manage with someone who understood loss and resilience. They weren't just colleagues. They'd become something neither expected, friends bound by a shared mission to see the invisible and help the forgotten. Then, 6 months after that day, the story leaked. A journalist from the local paper had pieced together what happened. Someone at the community center had recognized the pattern of sudden help, traced it back to Annabelle, and connected the dots to Jonathan Pierce. The article went viral within hours. "Billionaire's social experiment reveals the true nature of humanity," read the headline. Annabelle's phone exploded with interview requests, media inquiries, people wanting to tell her story on national television. She declined almost all of them. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It never had been. But Jonathan convinced her to do one interview. Just one. The interviewer, a woman named Sarah Chen, asked the question everyone wanted answered: "What did you learn from having unlimited money for 24 hours?" Annabelle paused, choosing her words carefully. "I learned that kindness doesn't require money. I'd been kind my whole life with nothing. But I also learned that money, in the right hands, with the right heart, can be a tool for extraordinary good. The problem isn't wealth itself. It's who has it and what they choose to see when they have it." Sarah turned to Jonathan. "And what did you learn?" His voice cracked with emotion. "I learned that my wife was right. I learned that empathy isn't something you can buy or fake, it's something you earn through suffering and maintain through choice. And I learned that there are people in this world with so little who would still give everything to help others." He looked at Annabelle. She didn't need my money to be remarkable. She was already remarkable. The money just let the rest of us see it. The interview ended, but the impact rippled outward in ways neither of them anticipated. Wealthy individuals started contacting the Horizon Trust, wanting to fund similar experiments. Jonathan established the 24-Hour Initiative, a program providing temporary financial freedom to carefully selected individuals who would use it to uplift their communities. But the real question remained: what would happen 1 year after that transformative day? That answer would reveal the true power of a single moment of compassion, and it's something you absolutely need to see. 1 year to the day, Annabelle and Jonathan returned to the same diner, sitting in the same booth where everything had changed. Annabelle still drove her old Honda, now fully repaired and maintained, but the same car nonetheless. "It reminds me," she'd explained to Jonathan once. "Every time I turn the key, I remember what it felt like when it wouldn't start. When getting to work meant 2 buses and 3 hours of my day. I never want to forget that feeling." Jonathan had brought something with him, a worn leather journal that he'd never shown anyone except his wife. Isabel's journal. With trembling hands, he opened it to a page dated 2 weeks before she died. "Read it," he said softly, sliding it across the table. Annabelle's eyes filled with tears as she read Isabel's elegant handwriting. Jonathan can't see them anymore, the struggling ones, the invisible ones. Wealth has built walls around his heart so high that he can't see people drowning right in front of him. "I wish I could show him that the measure of a man isn't what he's built, but what he's willing to give away. I wish I could teach him to see people again before I go. That's my last prayer. That somehow, someone will teach my husband to see again." Annabelle's hands shook as she closed the journal. "Jonathan. You gave me my wife's last wish," he said, his voice raw. "You taught me to see again. Not just poverty or struggle, but the resilience and beauty of people who have every reason to be bitter but choose kindness anyway. You showed me what Isabel was trying to tell me." Annabelle reached across the table and took his hand. "And you gave me the chance to prove that poor doesn't mean powerless. You gave me hope when hope felt like a luxury I couldn't afford." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning rush of diner customers, people just like Annabelle had been a year ago, hustling through their day, carrying invisible weights. The Horizon Trust had now helped over 2,000 families. Matthew's asthma was well managed, his medical care never in question. Lily had announced she wanted to become a social worker, inspired by watching her mother transform lives. The Community Relief Fund had distributed over 300 grants to families in crisis. But perhaps most importantly, Jonathan had reconnected with purpose. He'd stopped seeing his wealth as a scoreboard and started seeing it as a tool. Not for building monuments to himself, but for building bridges to people who'd been told they didn't matter. As they prepared to leave the diner, the waitress, a young woman who looked exhausted and overwhelmed, brought their check. Jonathan noticed her hands shaking slightly, the same way Annabelle's had a year ago. He caught Annabelle's eye. She smiled and nodded. Some experiments, it turned out, were worth repeating. Here's what this story teaches us: wealth isn't measured by what you keep, but by what you're willing to give when it matters most. True character isn't revealed in comfort, it's revealed in how you treat others when you finally have the power to choose. Annabelle Thompson spent 24 hours with millions and kept almost nothing for herself. She saw pain and tried to stop it. She had power and chose compassion. She was already extraordinary, the money just gave her the opportunity to show the world what humanity looks like when we choose each other over ourselves. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it reminded you that good people still exist in this world, then do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button for Heart Vault Stories. We bring you real stories of kindness, transformation, and the incredible power of human compassion. Don't just watch, become part of our community. Second, share this video with someone who needs to believe in humanity again. We all know someone who's lost faith in people. Send them this story. Third, drop a comment telling us, if you had Annabelle's 24 hours, what's the one thing you'd do? Who would you help first? Your answer might inspire someone else. Remember, you don't need a billionaire's credit card to make a difference. You just need to see the people around you and choose compassion when you have the chance. This is Heart Vault Stories, reminding you that sometimes the poorest among us are the richest in the ways that matter most. Now go out there and be someone's miracle today. Subscribe. Share. Inspire. That's how we change the world, one story, one heart, one act of kindness at a time.